So, with that out of the way, we got that out of the way. Now I want to introduce you to Susana Gibb. Susana Gibb is an entrepreneur, insurance professional, and media creator. Since taking over Gibb Insurance Services in 2021, the agency has won Best in DFW by the Dallas Morning News twice and Best in D magazine in 2024. Before leading Gibb Insurance Services, Susanna spent over 20 years in the Dallas insurance market and had a prolific career in film and television, appearing in over 250 productions. Her credits include working with big wigs like Kate Hudson, Richard Gere, and Giancarlo Esposito. You can also the brother of Phoebe in Friends, if anybody catches that. With recent work on the Taylor Sheridan's Lioness series, which, by the way, she was fantastic in. Susanna's career is defined by a unique blend of business acumen and creative storytelling. Whether growing a business, innovating in digital media, or captivating audiences on screen, she continues to push boundaries and inspire those around her. Thanks so much, Susanna, for joining us for today's webinar.
That was so nice. Thank you. That was really fun. I'm excited to be here.
The great thing about that is that my event coordinator wrote all of that. That's not all me. So that is all on her. So I'm going to give her some kudos right now. I'm really excited about this webinar, especially. I know you and I go a little bit back. We've been on some, a podcast together, but I'm really excited about this one because it's a passion of mine around surrounding brand and what a brand is for a business. A lot of people will look at a brand and say, okay, well, that's, it's on the side of my building. I was like, no, 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 no. That's your logo, that's your mark. But it's, brand encompasses so many different areas, including, yes, your logo, including, yes, your brand voice and how that sounds coming out of, your content and things like that. But today, part of the leadership series, I wanted to talk about, the brand of you as a leader and how you bring that into play as are out and talking with stakeholders, talking to the audience, or whoever you're talking to, how that encompasses you as the brand of your company. There was a quote that I found that was really fascinating, and I wanted to just kind of throw it out there. It says, your job as a leader is to be a chief storyteller. You have to tell the story of the company's mission, the story of the company's future, and the story of the people who make the company what it is. If you aren't telling your story, someone else is. And that is so powerful right there. Um, you know, that's the whole thing. If you're not out there and you're not branding yourself in the right way, I think it's going to eventually somebody else is going to tell the story for you. And I think that's super helpful. Which, by the way, is why I brought Susanna, because she has such a great background. Coming from, the Hollywood, doing all those actress type things, all the way to start, taking over Gibb Insurance Agency as the CEO and seeing how that kind of goes. So it's all your background is so unique, Susanna. And I just want to kind of talk a little bit about that and have you talk a little bit about that, how those different experiences have shaped the way maybe you lead today when it comes to being the power of you.
It's definitely been interesting having one foot in the creative world and the other foot in the business world because
Hmm.
they didn't always seem to match. And I kept both worlds separate for a long time. I didn't want to tell my insurance clients that I was acting. I would be on a conference that day that I had something on set because one of them said, well, you're going to get famous and move away. And I said, oh, well, if that's what you think, then I'm not going to tell people that I'm acting. And then there was this one year when I did a TXU commercial and it was a rattlesnake roundup. There's like a pen behind me with about 20 different rattlesnakes and they're all going,
Oh
and it
my
was for
gosh.
TXU. It was for the NBA finals. And it was when the finals were here in Dallas. And so
Yeah.
everybody saw it. And so the gig was up and my clients were like, we saw you. But the flip by then, they were like, that's so cool. We think that's so interesting. And it just became, I think, me being more comfortable with saying, well, this is who I am. I'm not just your insurance agent. I have this other life too, and they blend together. So, and
Well,
it's,
I remember talking to you the first time we met, and I felt like at that very point in time, you might have been a little bit reluctant to say, "Hey, yeah, I did a little bit of acting," but I think it's such a great conversation starter as well, you know.
it's a good common ground. People love to talk about movies, right? And one of my mentors told me once, he was like, all right, why do I buy insurance from you? And I was like, man, I don't know. I just sell insurance. It's not hard. I work hard for my clients. And he said, well, if you can't tell me why I should buy from you, then why should I? And eventually, we came and I talked, and what do I do and what makes me special, and who am I, right?
Hmm.
But he said, if you can link acting and insurance, I don't know of any other insurance person who has that. And that has been really the goal since then, is how do I bring this creative energy into what I do in a daily basis? And we talk a lot about what our clients' experience is going to be like, which is not crazy unique, but it means a very different thing. And we use phrases like who's know your audience. And I don't know, I use a lot of acting techniques in my sales techniques because I use those all the time to get in the door of places, right? So um and I also want my people to have a good experience too. I want my people to be happy to come to work. And if they're not happy here, let's find somebody a place where maybe they are going to be happy, because life is too short to work somewhere you hate. Let's not do that.
So I know when we had talked before about, this webinar and coming in, you had talked to me about how actors are trained in charisma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how to walk into a room and own it, even if they don't feel like they're totally confident. And I think that relates with some leaders. Some leaders are very good at this. That's the extrovert people. They will hit the room. They don't care who you are. Honestly, that's my 10-year-old son. My 10-year-old son is the extrovert. He doesn't care who you are. He's going to come talk to you. And I think you've got those people, but then you've got people who might be a little bit more introverted, who would rather stay behind the scenes, or behind the camera, and then, instead of being in front of it. How do you think someone can build that kind of same presence in business or leadership roles that you have kind of gained from, you know, those type of trainings you've had, when it comes
So
to charisma?
I had this job once, and it was
Mhm.
for Chuck Norris's son. And I was playing the bad guy's girlfriend because, bad guys don't commit, right? And so I'm supposed to come into the room, and because I've talked to the cops, he's gonna kill me. I'm gonna die. And the special effects guy comes up, and he's putting a squib, which is this, he's taping it to my stomach, and he's explaining what's gonna happen while he's doing it. And he's like, listen, I have this balloon full of blood. This little explosive is going to go off when he shoots you, and the blood is going to ooze out. It's going to kind of blow the front of your dress. It shouldn't hurt. But if it does, let me know. It's fine. And I was like, huh?
That's
Okay.
what everybody wants to hear.
Okay. Yeah. Right. So I go out, and I'm literally coming into the room, right? I come into the room, he shoots me, and I flinch. And the director comes over, and he's like, you can't flinch. It's going to break the shot. And I'm like, okay, okay. Don't flinch, don't flinch, don't flinch, don't flinch. And it doesn't really hurt, but it is like a flick, right? It's a solid flick. So I'm out there, and I'm like, please don't flinch. I go in, I do the scene again, and I flinch again. And so then I go back out, and now makeup is coming over, and they're like petting me and like, you're going to be okay. And wardrobe is petting me, and everybody's trying to calm me down. And I do this trick, and I'll show you in a minute what it is. And it just kind of went back to kind of my earlier days about becoming really grounded into your space. And I came in and I did the scene. I didn't flinch, and I died gloriously. And the director came over, and he was like, that was really great. But can you die faster next time? And I was like, oh, okay. Okay. But this is probably my favorite trick. and you're going to look dorky when you do it, but it is my favorite one. And it's especially because when I get nervous, I kind of shake, especially like it feels like my whole body is vibrating.
Right.
And if everybody on the webinar, since nobody can see you, if you'll just do this and you can do it at your desk, you just kind of shake your hands. You can shake your whole body, but if you just shake your hands and give it a good solid shake for like 10 seconds and just breathe. And then you feel how your hands feel after. Like my hands feel amazing now. And it's really energetically, I feel really relaxed. So the best way to walk into a room and feel confident is to practice walking into the room, right? You do all the things that you do. There's a whole ton of steps before you even get to the room, right? Which is ground and do whatever relaxation thing that you need. Maybe you shake your hands, maybe you do something else, but that'll make walking into the room, even though inside you may be freaking out, you've practiced enough that you don't look like you're freaking out.
That's a really great example, and because in fact, we were just talking about that before we hopped on here, and you were like, "Are you nervous?" And I was like, "Well, I mean, I am a little. I mean, I think I've done these a couple times. I think you start to kind of get used to it, but and I talked about how before I would pace. I would just
Mm.
walk around in circles, and people would be coming up to me and going, "Are you okay?"
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm like, "Oh, please, just give me a moment. Give me a moment." But
I've
that's a
been on
really great
other
thing.
sets doing the shaking thing, and the director walked over. He was like, "Oh, what's wrong? Are you all right?" I'm like, "Nah, dude, I'm cool. I'm just getting some energy out so I can be relaxed." So maybe, you might want to do that little trick in private so people don't think something's wrong.
Um, going back to like the charisma thing and, and really talking about more about the confidence and self-awareness. And I think those two things are really big themes today when it comes to, leaders in the world, right? Um, how talk a little bit about how maybe these have played a role in your own journey, especially when you've had to step into like some unfamiliar and intimidating spaces. I'm sure that that's probably happened in some auditions you've had before where you've had to step into an audition that you weren't prepared for or, you know, made you feel uncomfortable.
I tried to count all the auditions that I've done. I know it's thousands. I
Wow.
think a low amount would be about 3,000, mid is 4, and a high would be 5,000 over the course of my career. Man, and there have been some I've just bombed, honestly, but I always liked auditioning. I always thought it was a great opportunity because that's the only way you're going to get a job is if you go into the audition. I liked getting in front of people. I liked talking to people. Um, when you would go into Now everything's taped, but it used to be you would go into an audition and it would either be the casting director and the camera person. And then if you got the call back, you'd walk in and there'd be 20 people all looking at you, trying to figure out if you were going to solve their problem. And that's, I think in sales and in everything else, it's like, what problem can you solve for people?
Hmm.
And in film and TV, they have to find a person for this character. Are you going to solve that problem for them? Um, and again, just being able to, it just takes practice. Everything takes practice, but continuing to walk into the room, continuing to try it. There's some quote. It was like, if you find someone who's never failed, then you found somebody who never tried. You just got to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in those type of situations, where you're just walking in and you're just like, I don't know if this is going to go good or it's going to go bad. And that's okay. You got to be able to accept the fact that, it may not go the way you want it to go, or maybe that you built up into your mind. But having the confidence to go in and know who you are as a person, know who you are as a brand, and what you tend to bring, I think, you know, for me, have felt like it has relaxed me. I just to step into the room, knowing knowing full well that this could go really well or it could go really, really bad. But then again, it also puts you in a situation where you start to find some common ground as well when
Mhm.
you are talking about certain things. And
Prepping to walk in the room is huge though. Like what we were just talking about, because I walked into the room once without my prep. And I think I told you this story. I lost the part to Ali Lauder, who's now on Landman. They told me ahead of time, you're the top Texas choice for this.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't prep well enough, and I couldn't get words out. Like I was really breathy and I couldn't find my voice. And then I started to panic and I was up in my head. So, and then, you just go on. And now I hate Ali Lauder to this day because she took my part. I don't, but I do have a
Which
special place for her. I'm like, oh, that's Ali. She's like one of my friends.
I do know which movie you're talking about, which was one of my favorite movies back in the day.
Back in
So
the day.
I would love to have seen you in that part. Knowing what it was, I would love to have seen you in that part, knowing you now. Um, One thing I did want to talk about is is taking what you had talked about earlier, is taking, the fact that, yes, I was an actress and I was kind of afraid of, bringing it out, talking about our insurance company and stuff like that. Uh, in how you've embraced that creativity and embraced that into what you do. Um, and, and taking that and then starting a podcast, this Susana Gibb podcast. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that correlates a little bit and how that has generated some, either just some new connections or new ways of just trying to tell the story of who you are and your company?
Well, I used to keep them all separate. Like I said, the
Right.
worlds were very separate. And when I first started acting, these casting directors told me, these were actually the casting directors. They found Haley Joel Osment for Forrest Gump. And they were like, Susana, because they sounded like they'd smoked for about 1,000 years. Susana, you're going to age out at some point. You're just going to be, the roles aren't going to be there for you. And so I started producing, which was fun and I loved it, but it was 16-hour days and it was away from my kids. And that was really the biggest challenge for me as a creative person. These roles would take me, like I shot a movie in Oklahoma for a month. And that was like, I was away from my kids. I was away from my family. I was away from my business. It hurt everything. However, I need a creative outlet. And so I put the movies on the back burner so I could focus on my business and my kids, because they say we can have it all and we can, but that doesn't mean we're going to be happy if we have it all. And so it was
Right.
like, all right, which am I going to focus on? Which of these things are going to give me the most overall happiness? And so I made acting a hobby, and this was my focus. Insurance was my focus. And then we decided, well, why don't we try this podcast thing? I had been on somebody else's podcast and I didn't want to be somebody else's story. I wanted to be my story. And so we started this podcast and we used my name in the title so it would link back to my agency name, see if we could capture a little SEO action there. And we have in some cases. And it's really exciting because it's kind of the first creative venture that actually helps my business. It
Hmm.
gives me a nice way to call people up and say, hey, like I asked you to be on the podcast, and now we've talked multiple times since. And so it's been a great way to really kind of develop some relationships and learn a new craft, because I thought, well, sure, I've been on camera for 20 years. How hard can it be to do a podcast? And it's a new creative outlet. It's different than other creative outlets. You have to be really fast and think on your feet, and you have to listen. And so it's been really great to finally have something that supports my insurance and my other goals.
Well, and it also kind of opens up, and what you talked about is the storytelling part of your brand, right? The brand of
Mhm.
you being able to be that storyteller. Can you talk a little bit about, how storytelling, maybe from your past experience of acting or just, being on this podcast, how that kind of has gone into your process now?
So everybody says storytelling is the way to do sales, right? Because people resonate with stories. They
Yeah.
want to connect with stories. There's an emotional component to stories. Um, People don't want to just buy things. They want to have that emotional connection. And that's really all about what stories are about, or creating a character on screen is is having something to relate to and see yourself in that position. So I really like writing sales scripts for my people. I try and write it in their voice. We do different scripts based on the different people and how they like to talk, and we tailor how we communicate to our clients. It's that whole know your audience thing. So
Hmm.
if we can figure out how our clients want to be communicated to based on, we use DISC, which we love, and we change how we talk to them based on how we think it's best for them to receive it. So, and I think clients like that. And we know initially what they need, right? If somebody asks questions in a certain way, we're like, oh, they need more information about our process. Or we have this other person who's really fast and short on the phone. They have no interest in our process. So why even tell them about our process? So it's really, it's I think ultimately trying to create that feeling for people, how we want them to feel.
Yeah, and I love how you talk about how you create different scripts for different people, and that's really smart. Because there are going to be those buyer personas that are going to be out there that you've got to be able to match, towards sometimes, and how you build those buyer personas, and how we need to talk to those, and how that, there needs to be a consistency when it comes around your, tone of voice as your own brand. And I love how you kind of incorporated those individual things, and really thought through, like, well, we need to have like maybe a script about this and then this, instead of just having that overall arching elevator pitch. I mean, you still need to have an elevator pitch. I think that's very important, but being able to kind of take that and really slicing it up into, okay, how do I talk to this person? This person who needs, let's say, personal insurance, or this person who needs corporate insurance, but they only need this type of corporate insurance. How do we, incorporate all those type of things, and really it still resonate with our own brand and who we are as a company. Um,
Yeah, you can't
you
sell
know,
anything you don't believe in. You
no,
just can't. It's not even
no,
worth it.
not at all. Not at all. It's difficult to do it that way, because then it comes across that way, right? I mean, when somebody's looking across the table, and they're listening to you trying to sell them on something you don't feel confident about it, they're going to read your face.
Mm-mm.
It's not only just the verbals, but I also think that, it is the nonverbals that come into play as well. People can read the nonverbals pretty quickly. So, having that smile on your face, and having that, oh, I'm so interested in this moment, this conversation, what maybe the problems that you have right now, and let's talk about that and have more of a personal connection that way.
I actually didn't think when I first started, I was like, I don't know how to be a salesperson. So I literally had a moment when I said, okay, I'm going to pretend that I'm playing the role of salesperson so
Hmm.
I could figure it out. Initially, I smiled a lot in my sales presentations,
Hmm.
and then I realized that people don't like that. On commercials, that's fine, but in real life, people think that's weird. And so I pulled back. And over the years, it was like, oh, sales is nothing but talking to people and listening to people. That's all it is. I've been a salesperson this whole time. I just didn't realize it. I'm not the slick, I can't sell you crap that you don't need. I just never have. I personally would love to see the line item on a spreadsheet of people I've talked out of dental insurance. I think I probably would have made so much money, but I was like, man, don't buy that. You don't need that. It's fine. So
But it's understanding them. It's understanding by that, what you were just talking about, having that conversation with them,
having a
understanding,
connection.
yeah,
Yes.
having a connection with
Having
them
a
is
connection.
how that, you know, but I think it really shows that, and you talked about it, you're like, oh, coming in at a CEO level, I didn't know I was going to be a salesperson, right? And
Mhm.
selling all these things. And I think it's important as a leader, you are the brand of your company, or I guess really the face sometimes
Mhm.
of that company. It's really important to be able to go out and tell your own story, tell the story of your company, but also tell the story about who you are and how you got there and how you have embraced this company, or the journey that, the company has brought, uh, you to this place, right? I think those type of stories really resonate a lot with people. At least it does for me, I would say. I love just hearing somebody's backstory, right? Give me your
Yeah, you are
backstory.
so
Just
much about
tell
you're
me
so good with
something,
brand, you know.
but I think it's important, as a leader, and you're going out and maybe networking, at networking, opportunities, that to be able to kind of talk about who you are, personally, but I also think, as your own company as well. So that's where the connections are. Um, I know you mentioned about knowing your own value and how that has kind of like helps others grow. What does that look like in real life for you, from, when you're talking about like mentoring or empowering or just leading your own team internally as well as a leader?
It's interesting that you asked me this. I was talking to this young woman today at my networking meeting, and she was so cool. She was so smart. And I talked to her for 10 minutes. And I was thinking in my head, I was like, oh, I'd really love to mentor this girl. I think it would be so fun to talk with her and see where she's going to go. And I swear, like 3 seconds later, she was like, do you know how I could find mentors? And I was like, I just had that thought. I'd love to mentor you. There's something really satisfying about giving back. And there's studies that say when we give our time, like there is a dopamine hit in our brain for doing those
Hmm.
things and giving back to somebody else.
Hmm.
Teaching your team, like we do dorky things in our office. Like we've done voice exercises where everybody has to lay on the floor and we work on diaphragmatic breathing. And we've done grounding techniques where everybody's like, all right, you're a tree, you've got roots. Let's just, feel the wind coming through. And so people can feel comfortable getting up in front of people. And I love being able to teach those things. I think those are so fun. So fun to be able to share them and have somebody go, I really liked that. That was helpful.
Yeah. Even though it makes you feel kind of embarrassed, maybe, being a tree trying to wave your hands in the air. I mean,
I
I would be
know.
like, I'd be like one of those ones where it's like, I don't know if I want to be like waving my hands. But, it's when you go through that, when you actually start doing it and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm really enjoying this. This is actually helpful.
Yeah, we're like, all right,
Um,
everybody face away from each other so you don't have to look at each other being dorky. And, but yes, there's, you got to be a child about some things. And, even
yeah.
though we're vintage, apparently, you still have to retain that childlike curiosity about the world and what you're going to do
Um, oh shoot, I was going with something with that one, but
with the trees and the
yeah, I was actually trying to think of the
the
trees
grounding
and
and
where
trees
did
and
where did that come from? No, but I would say like um I'm assuming now that as the CEO, and you're probably out meeting some new people and things like that. How do you approach, maybe, from your leadership standpoint, like how do you approach those type of new meetings that you have? You know, is there something that you bring to the table? Is it something that you start the conversation with? How does that kind of go about?
one of the best books that I ever read was How to Win Friends and Influence People. And that was a big change for me as far as when I met people, because I always used to worry about what am I going to say? I love being early to the party and watching people come in because it's less pressure for me. Um,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
now that I don't worry so much about what I'm going to say anymore because I know that if I ask them good questions, that's even more important because people would rather talk about themselves than
Hmm.
listen to me. Yeah, 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 on and on and on.
Yeah.
And so what I found is if I am super interested and tied in and doing active listening, which is another acting thing, when you're really like, you're focused on that other person and what they're saying, I make it all about them as long as they want. And 9 times out of 10, at some point, I see them have a reaction where they're happy and suddenly they want to know about me. And it's not, I don't have to force it. There's always that one person who never turns it around, and that's fine. Those I'm probably not going to have a great connection with, but the ones that there is a difference when they turn it around. And I'm like, wow, they are really into this conversation now. And they want to hear my story. of where I've been and my challenges and where I want to go. And I love that. What is it? The Ford model, which also really helps me, or form, which is, you talk about your friends, your occupation, your recreation, and then your motivation and dreams. And so that was a big guiding thing for me when I'm learning to talk to people. I was like, okay, how do you know so and so? And it just gives a model for having a conversation,
Right.
um, and took a lot of the pressure off because I was like, oh, I don't know what to say. And you don't have to say anything.
Hmm. Um, you know, now that you've been in this leadership role for a while, I'm assuming you probably had some, had to reach out and have some type of support to help you through it all, right? Is there one in particular thing that you can think of, like you were just like, oh my gosh, I need this kind of support to help me, and how to, transition from being an actor and being a CEO now of a company?
Mm. Um, I got a lot of help from business coaches
Hmm.
because they work with a lot of other business people. And I think continuing to be curious and asking questions of other people who are in those roles, how did you get there? What do you love about your job? Yeah, I ask people questions
Yeah.
all the time, because I've been doing this for 27 years, but I've had my agency now for 5 and I still feel like a baby. There's always somebody who has more information than me and how they can help me, and networking even within your own sphere is super helpful because those people, the people who are
That's
doing what you're already doing, they have some great ideas.
I think that's what I was gonna, talk about too, or just bring up is, being able to find those leadership networking, groups. I think those are really, really helpful. Getting like-minded people is on the same room, talking about some
Mhm.
of the issues that you have, in a comfortable, safe place where, you can feed off of each other and just be like, I'm having this issue. Has anybody else had this? And of course, there's probably going to be several in that room that are going to go, yeah, and we did it this way.
Mhm.
And that kind of
Mhm.
support, I think, also helps. So if you're a leader out there and you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this on my own, feeling the stress, I don't know what I'm, need to do next. I think find yourself. There's tons of them I know here locally in Dallas Fort Worth, of these leadership groups, that help folks, as they transition or as they are in that new role,
I get a
as they.
lot out of I'm in BNI. I get a lot out of BNI. I know not everybody loves it, and that's fine, but I get a lot out of that. There's always Facebook groups. There's 1,000 different Facebook groups for whatever people are interested in. There's so much out there. There's so much information out there. It's kind of crazy sometimes.
It is. It is. And I mean, and in fact, I mean, you can even go to, generative AI and find out some things. I think there's some things back and forth. Some people like it, some people don't. That's okay. I particularly like generative AI or Gen AI or ChatGPT, whichever one you want to call it. I think it's going to be ChatGPT. I think it's the new Google of web search, right?
Mm-hmm.
You think of generative AI, you always say ChatGPT. In fact, we even did like a webinar a couple of weeks ago. Wink, wink, wink. For those who want to go and take a look at it, but you know, having those type of resources and using those type of resources to help you through, I think is really important. One question. Oh, I love this. We actually asked a poll. What helps you feel most confident in your role? And most people said knowing my strengths. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really important. I think second up is being prepared and practiced. I think we talked about that. We fed on that. I think coming in and being prepared is really important. I know I found myself in several different situations where I came in blind. I was not prepared coming in, and it truly showed. It
Mm-hmm.
truly showed. People were like, "Yeah, I'm not interested in hearing what you're saying." I mean,
Yeah.
it happens all the time. I mean, you ask my wife, she probably would say the same thing, but that's okay. Um, you know, I know we've talked a little bit about your podcasting and things like that. How do you think you decide which, when you're at a leadership role, what risks are worth, taking? when you're talking about like maybe there's a different line of business that you guys need to kind of get into, or you know um, maybe there's something that we want to try and be creative about, with our own brand. When you're having those kind of risk, reward type, conversations, or just those decisions, you know, what do you do? How do you decide those things?
So we're always aware of, I think the phrase is beware of the shiny, right? So the shinies are the things that take you away from your goals. So if you have your goals clearly in front of you and you're like, okay, does this help my long-term goal? Does this hurt my long-term goal? Is one. Um, because the shiny, sometimes it's real pretty and you're like, oh, that's going to be so great. I want to
Yeah.
bring it in. But if it doesn't support the long-term goal, it's got to go. Um, the other thing for at least the podcast, it was like, okay, what's it going to cost us? All right, it's $20 for the subscription. There's a little bit of time involved. Is this going to hurt us? No. The worst thing that can happen is it's bad and nobody listens to it. So that's not anything bad. What do we gain from it? What can we possibly gain? Do we have the time to do it? That's our big thing, is do we have the time to experiment with it? Um, and so I think the big thing is, how much does it cost? How much time is it going to take? And does it support our long-term goal? And so the
Yeah.
podcast was like, well, yeah, why not try it? Why not give it a try?
That's great that you talked about that, as far as the time. I know we've looked into doing podcasting. We still aren't completely out of maybe one day doing it. I think we've found that webinars and things like that have helped us, but you're absolutely right. You've got to look at what's the cost benefit of it. What's how much time is going to be taken up, whose time is it going to take up, how much time as a leader is it going to take up for me, or do I need to hire somebody outside to kind of come in and take over for those type of things?
And the podcast was huge this past year. I don't even know that I told you this, honestly, but
It was
at
because
the,
I was on there.
well, no, it was just timing wise. I think we at the end of the year, everybody says when you start a podcast, it's going to be hard. If you start anything, people say it's going to be hard, but they don't tell you
Hmm.
why,
Hmm.
really. If you start a business, they say, oh, it's going to be hard. And you go, okay, well, people are doing it. I can do this. Right. And they say, when you start a podcast, it's going to be hard. You're not going to get a lot of audience right away. It's going to be frustrating, but you just got to keep going. And so at the end of last year, we were to that point where I was like, man, I'm feeling really down about this. I'm feeling like we're not getting the traction. It's a lot of time. Could we be spending our time differently? And there was that also magical point of, and there's a place in, I think, any business or creative spot where it's like, okay, this is, and it's in scripts, right? It's the dark night of the soul. That's what happens in scripts. It's the very deepest, darkest part of the movie. And then the next day, Gandalf comes over the mountain with all the reinforcements, right? So it was kind of our dark night of the soul with the podcast. Are we going to keep going? And Shelby, who works with me, was like, I don't think you can quit at this point. I think this is that moment when you get a little bit of grit and you push through. And so we sat down and we said, okay, how can we make this more relevant to our audience? How can we bring more value to our audience and make it something like here that, are we bringing value to the people? Are we talking about what they are going to get out of it? And so this past year, we changed our whole trajectory and said, okay, we're going to talk about mindset. We're going to talk about confidence. We're going to talk about how you show up in the room, what you have to do to get there. And it's still a work in progress, but um, the we've had some really interesting people on so far. There's been the national clay pigeon shooting champion, who is a woman who competes against men all the time. We had an Olympic
Wow.
triple jumper who, she's at the Beijing Olympics, and she said um, she was there. She realizes every single person at the Olympics is just as trained, as just as well fit, well rounded. Their bodies are the same. Everything is the
Hmm.
same except for their mind. That's the biggest differentiator. And she didn't prep very well. She didn't know. She didn't know what she didn't know. And she blew her hamstring before she could even go. And there's so many great lessons from athletes that you can take for your your business life too. So that's been kind of our focus this year. And it's been really exciting. It's also fostered a lot of conversations in our office about, yeah, how are we showing up for our work,
Yeah.
for our family, for our kids, for our friends.
Yeah.
So it got fun again, basically.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I love the fact of the mental part of, the athlete, I think that is such a big thing, there's so many times where I think honestly, I think keeping your body, fit, healthy,
Hmm.
things like that, but keeping your mind also, fit. It's also a muscle, and I think sometimes we forget that it also needs to be trained and it also needs to be worked on. There's several apps that I pull up, you know, during the day that are just little games. They're little brain working games that, just to help me kind of keep working on it, because as I get older, it starts to kind of get
That's what they
tired and,
say. That's what they
um,
say.
yeah, so just kind of keeping it, staying sharp a little bit, you know. What do you feel like one leadership lesson you learned the hard way and how it may have changed your approach going
Ooh,
forward? I know,
leadership
tough one.
lesson the hard way. Um, I know that I had been in the business, I'd been in insurance for 20 years. And then at 22 years, I thought, well, I'm gonna buy my book from my dad and I'm gonna be my own agency. And I've been in the business for so long, how I've got this. It's not gonna be hard, right? Um, and so I bought the book of business. It was mine. We put in a new agency management system, a new CRM. We put in processes. We changed our accounting system. We changed all of these things. And I was miserable. I was miserable and I hated it. And I cried all the time and I made everybody crazy. And my and I don't know why it takes so long. Like I'm seeing therapists, seeing Reiki, trying to be like, what do I have to do to be happy? Right. And it's not just one thing, but it's a lot of self-care things along the way. And really, I think the biggest one is I get up and I do a little bit of yoga and I set my intention for the day. And I started it actually because I was freaking out that I wasn't going to be able to make payroll. And so I'm doing like sun salutations. And I am on the inhale, I'm like, oh my God, you got this. And on the exhale, I'm like, it's going to be fine. And I'm just breathing. But I kept up that whole thing. And I may only do it for 5 minutes, and that's fine. But it's setting the intention for the day so I can run my day and it doesn't run me. And that it's not about getting there and when I'm going to feel comfortable with what I'm doing. It's saying, this is where I am now, and I'm going to
Right.
enjoy this journey, because that cliche is true. It's about the journey, not the destination, and staying in here, right? That leading as a leader is one step at a time. It's every
Yeah.
day. Just keep going.
Yeah. Enjoy the journey. You
Yeah.
got to enjoy it. I mean, there's going to be some ups and downs. There's going to be some, successes and failures, and learning from those failures is always good. But enjoy the journey because things are short. What they say, life is short. Enjoy
The
it. So,
the greatest thing about, I think, being in insurance or business is seeing the build and the momentum.
hmm
The biggest challenge about acting is that literally every job you start over. Like Kate Hudson said, she was like, and her mom told her this. She was like, after every job, you're going to start over. You're going to be on the bottom and you have to earn your job again. So that constant turmoil of where's my next job going to come, I do not miss that. I do not miss that at all.
there's a Q&A that came in. It says acting requires stepping into different characters. How does that skill has helped you adapt to different situations?
That one goes back to how, if I can communicate with you in a way that you understand, that's basically four different character models, right? There's one. So if I know the character that you need from me, then I can play that character, right? You need me to talk fast and give you options and not give you a lot of details. Great. I can do that. You need me to be super flowery and be your best friend and make it really emotional based, then we'll do that. Or if you need me to just talk about process and no emotion whatsoever, then we'll do that. So that one for sure.
Okay. Awesome. Um, I was going to say something. We were talking earlier about, the different characteristics of leadership and things like that. And I think one of the things that I find has helped me in looking at maybe someone as a good and great leader is them being authentic to themselves,
Mm,
and really being authentic to the person that they're talking to as well. Have you found that has helped you, as you've gone along and you've said, you know what, I could come in and act myself, a certain way when I'm talking to somebody, but really I need to find a way to be authentic to who I am
yes.
especially when I'm talking about our business.
So I think I'm going to back into this one
Yeah,
because I
absolutely.
think people's perception of you can really
Mhm.
play into how you present yourself. Like those casting directors I talked about earlier, they told me early on, they're like, listen, you're going to play leading lady roles. You're going to play the hero's wife, the hero's girlfriend, the bad guy's girlfriend. Um, you're going to play nice, pretty, not gorgeous. Hair, makeup, lighting does amazing things for me. And so I know that I have like wearing nice things and looking nice can get me in the door, right? So, and that's the perception of me. I've also been told I have a really strong RBF, so I try and really consciously smile more because the sides of my mouth kind of turn down and my eyes turn down, and so that's how my face just is naturally, right? So I know that's how people perceive me. So if I want them to perceive me as nice, then I need to smile a little bit more, which is, I do feel like I'm a nice person. I have an ornery side occasionally, which I blame my grandpa, and that's whatever. Sometimes you just got to stir the pot. But in general, this is my brand, right? So the flip side of that is um, what's the opposite of your brand? How can you flip the script? So for
Right.
people like if you don't have a casting director to tell you what your basic brand is, there's a couple things that I think are really fun that I would love to suggest. This one's kind of
Absolutely.
it's kind of out there, but it is fun if people have the nerve to do it. And it's you go up to a random stranger and you got to jump right in because they're going to think you're trying to sell them something. You just say, "Hi, I'm doing a project. Could you please tell me what your first impression of me was?" Because it only takes 3 seconds for a first impression. And they're going to tell you, and you can try it smiling and not smiling, right? Because you can be the pretty one, the nice one, the funny one, the mean one, right?
Right.
The smart one. Like there's all these character archetypes that people automatically associate with us. You can ask your friend, "Hey, you've introduced me to so and so. What do you think? What did they say about me?" Or if you find people that you look like, right? Like today, somebody told me I looked like Kristen Wiig, which I was like, sweet. They think I'm funny. I love it. Right. So I can steal things from that brand persona and use
Yeah.
it to my advantage or flip the script and play the opposite. Right. Which I love to play the opposite game. That's really funny.
I love how you talk about first impressions too. I think that's so important. You know, especially, in business, I try to explain this to my kids all the time, and I try to explain it to my 23. He, of course, he is 23 years old, and he's still trying to find himself. But I think it's really important. First impressions are really important when you're talking to somebody and you're going up and trying to meet somebody for the first time. They're gonna, you know, we're all human. I think we all judge, in a certain way. And that's that first judgment call on,
Mhm.
when you see somebody, face to face, for the first time. So I'm really glad that you brought that up as part of, being your authentic self and how you present yourself
If
for
you
the
don't
first
like how
time.
people perceive you, then you have the opportunity to change it, right? But you got to know
Yeah,
what people think of you
yeah,
before you've even opened your mouth,
yeah,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. Or if that's just not, that's just the way they're going to perceive you, then, maybe sometimes it's just okay to walk away.
Yeah.
I mean, so, um,
I do. My uncle told me he sold paint back in the day. Back in the day when they had 3 martini lunches, and he always said, "You people can buy something from anybody. They can buy. You have the same thing that everybody else has. They're buying it from you. They want it from you."
right. Absolutely. Um, I know we're running up on time here. I wanted to ask you one more question here, and as a way to help our audience and things like that. What do you feel like is one tool or resource? Maybe it's a book, maybe it's a podcast, maybe it's a technique that you've, established over the years that that you feel has really changed the way that you have led um, or lead and your company and who you are.
So changing the way that I've led. This is
Hmm.
somewhat going back to that setting your intention for the day,
Hmm.
which is I like to read a lot of different books and get a lot of input from other people. I have
Hmm.
about 20 different podcasts that I've subscribed to. And if one of the titles appeals to me, then I try and listen to it and be always open to it. But it's that every day setting the intention of like, okay, this is what I want to accomplish today. I want to film myself so I can see how people perceive me. I want to practice grounding. I want to finish this book so I can lead more authentically. That's probably the biggest. It's just being intentional and not
Yeah,
saying I'm going to get to it. I'll do it when, because you have to start somewhere. And so just take one little single step every day to be whatever the leader that you want to be.
that's awesome. I love that. Um, I had just a conversation probably an hour before this thing where I was, trying to give some advice on presenting and being in front of people. And I had actually mentioned something that I learned from you,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is, yeah, which is, record yourself, and see how it comes across. I think there's so many lessons that can come from that based on what we were just talking about, perception, authenticity, how people are perceiving you. You're going to be able to perceive it better if you can see yourself doing that. And I think, doing it, if you don't want to record it and you don't want to hear yourself talk, stand in front of a mirror and start going
The
over
recording
whatever
thing
you're
is
doing.
so better, much better though. Although I will say the first time you see it, it's shocking. And so it's just like, oh my God, that's what I look like. The second one, I think the second time you watch it through, you start to get used to this is how I look, this is how I sound. And then the third time is really when you say, okay, this is how I can make this a little bit better. I can change this aspect, but it's not until the third time when you can literally just start to be objective about it versus go, what is this person? So, because it's different than looking in the mirror, it's just different.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Susanna, I know we're coming up on time. I really, really appreciate you joining us today. You've brought some really great stories, some really great insights. I have to say it again. I just love your story. I love how
Oh,
you've gone from, your acting career and how you've brought those things into your leadership role. And I think, and I hope that everybody out there that you've got a little bit of something out of this because I think you bring so much to your role and so much to who you are and the authenticity of who you are as well as a leader. So I really appreciate that.
well, thank you. I had a little bit of imposter syndrome before I did this, honestly. I was like, oh my gosh, why do they
Oh
want to
no,
listen to me? And then you just have to make that voice be quiet, be like, shh,
that's
shh, shh.
right. That's right. I have to tell myself all that time.
Yeah.
Well, at least my
And this
wife
is
tells me
fun.
all the time. Um,
Josh, you're
all
talking
right.
to yourself again.
I know I am. I am. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Susanna, again for joining us today. And we will have this recording to you within the next day or within the next week. Please join us and subscribe to us on YouTube. So thank you, and everybody have a wonderful day.
Bye. Thanks.